I'm next to Silbury Hill, and it's a very impressive monument. But I'll get on to Silbury in a second, because I'm at the Stratford, and a strat in Old English, as I say a gazillion times on these things, is a Roman road, and it went from down there, along here, next to the A4, and across here. So it must have been up the hill up there. It must have been, the ford must have been here. So we know it was a ford, not a bridge. And so the charter says go from Chirkstede to Stratford, then on to Elen. Elen means an elder tree, and obviously that's not going to exist 1,000 years later. But we do know the next landmark is the Servan Beachas, which I'm going to show you in a bit. It's over Wading Hill, and I'll talk about Wading Hill as well. But anyway, while we're at Silbury, let's go and have a look. So this is, so here we have, that's Silbury Hill. This down here is the beck of Beckhampton. And a drainage channel that goes up there. So now there is a linguistic problem with the word beck with Beckhampton. There is a linguistic problem with the word Beckhampton and associating it with a beck. A batch is, or back is the ridge, a ridge, and there's no ridge anywhere near Beckhampton. It should have, if it had been named after a beck, it should have had a different vowel in there. I can't remember what it is, like Batchhampton or something like that. But the characteristic, one of the characteristics of Beckhampton is this beck goes through it. Now I'm not alone in thinking that this great big trough, trough that Silbury Hill is built out of was meant to be flooded. I believe that as well. I'm not alone. So the Beckhampton did that. The beck of Beckhampton did that, and it just joins the Kennet just over here. Well, joins the Winterbourne to become the Kennet. So my theory is that this sort of 5 acres here, including the Swallowhead Springs, is an important sacred point, the beginning of the Kennet. Right, off to Wading Hill, and talk a little bit about that, and then we'll go on our way to the Servan Beachas. It's pretty cold. The wind makes it much worse. I mean, it's hovering about 0 Celsius, and it'll be even worse when the sun goes down. But I feel really up for it in the morning when I'm getting out of bed. And then I go out here, my fingers don't work anymore, and I lose interest in making it a really good video. It gets exhausting in the wind, in the cold. So I'm at the top of Weydon Hill. So of course you might be thinking, so anything to do with God Woden? Not really, ever so slightly, but don't make that assumption straight away. It's Wardane Hill, Hula, something like that. It comes from two Old English words, wech and duna, and wech means idol. That is a statue of a god, a pagan god normally, and duna is hill. So this is the hill of the pagan god, basically. And so yeah, it could remotely be it could have been sanctified to Woden, but just as likely to have been Thunor or Frigg or something. But it's so yeah, it's probably what I'm trying to say is don't automatically link. There are different vowels in Weydon than there is in Woden. Woden means the god Woden is the god of madness. His name is like Wode, which is like madness, frenzy. But this is Wech, which means idol, which is a different word entirely. But it's still just as interesting in my view. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, we're leaving Silbury behind. Let's go and have a look at the Servan Beachas, which are just in front over here. So down there are two lonely stones on the way up to the Servan Beachas. Those two lonely stones are part of the avenue. Much more stones over there, but they are part of the avenue. I wanted to say a couple of other things. This I forgot to say when I was up at Silbury and at the top of Weydon Hill. The whole of this area, this complex, this religious complex, really important in the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, wasn't, the Iron Age weren't interested, but the Romans were. Bear in mind, the Romans in Britain weren't just Roman, they were Romano-British. So they synthesised their religion. This is where we get Sulis Minerva and Apollo Cunimaglos. Cunimaglos is a Celtic word meaning Lord of the Hounds or Hound Lover, and Apollo is the god of hunting, of music, and is he god of hunting? Anyway, he's into house. Bugger, that's a hare running away. Bear with me. So yeah, the SD card gave up the ghost. So anyway, so they were British. They were even though the Iron Age peoples didn't venerate this area, they still were really into. Well, they're certainly into. I think there was a villa up near Avery, but there was a town right at the foot of the Silbury, a proper Roman town. And we don't have a name for it. It's not on the itinerary, the Antonine itinerary, but so it could have been just a crossroads. So it wasn't an official station. It was something that grew organically to service people. Maybe it was a crossroads of some kind. It may very well have been, but there was a Roman town there, and they buried the people up on the overlooking Silbury Hill. But all of that's completely obliterated. You can't see any of it. You can't even see anything from satellite photography. But there is some geophys done, and we can see it's a ladder settlement. So it's one street with bits sticking, crazy, in stages up a street like a ladder. So So I wanted to say that about the Romans. So they were here. We know there were Romans buried up here because they had tiny little nails inside their burials, which are hobnails from boots, and that's how you can tell a Romano Briton from an Anglo-Saxon. One of the ways is look for the hobnail boots. But I also want to mention Silbury. It's not, you might think to yourself, oh, I can think of loads of things that are in southern England that are called, that begin with the word Silchester. He says loads, but there are. But there's also things like Salisbury Castle overlooking Hillfort, overlooking Bath, and you might think that there's some sort of god, Sil, maybe Sulis. The original, the early name for Silbury, where he gets his name, is Celeburia, and Cella is an enclosure, so it's an enclosure on or around the mound. So that's it's nothing to do with. So that's one of the. Again, it's only 1,000 years ago when that was built. 3,000 years ago, no, 4,000 years ago, and the same with Avebury. An old name for Avebury is Wala Ditch, which means ditch of the Welsh. People who came, the Britons that came before the English. So we can see, we get an insight. We're not seeing 4,000 years ago, we're only seeing 1,000, but it's 1,000 years closer.